Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week, the economy, the markets, how your food bill is going to go up another $5 billion. Mark of the Beast is here in Sweden and Norway and the Norwegian countries. We have the second country that officially makes Bitcoin money. We have a huge hack with the NFTs. Let's get started. Overall, we have similar preocupaciones, if you guys want to know how to say it in English. In Spanish, I mean, I always do the Spanish videos first and I always lose my train of thought. The worries from this week, the same worries from last week, kind of the same overall situation. Obviously the inflation and this huge crackdown from the resurgence of the pandemic in China. Remember that China is the second largest economy in the world, and they're literally caging people in buildings. These huge high rises in Shanghai. They're putting fences around the buildings for a quarantine in regards to a huge resurgence of COVID. Overall for the week, the US market's mostly down. NASDAQ 100 has a 13% fall in April, which makes it the biggest drop since 2008. Canada also was down just over 2%. Overseas market news, European markets mostly lower as well. The only one that was positive was the FTSE out of London. And Latin America, we have mostly lower markets as well, 3, 4, 5%-ish. Far East, South Africa, Nigeria, all of them mostly positive. And then if we have in Asia and then in Australia, the Philippines being the biggest loser at a mostly down market in the Far East, 3.97%. Bitcoin, and I did say those countries backwards, so it's just follow me with the percentages there. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency news. Brazil has officially passed its first bill in the Senate governing crypto, which could be the framework of what the regulatory environment is going to be in Brazil. If you guys think the United States is how do you say that in Pearl? Bureaucratic, there it is. The Brazil is something that you guys have never ever seen. There's literally rules for rules on top of rules. But it's good to see that more and more countries are starting to regulate it. Obviously, I always believe that in the future, it's not going to be Bitcoin per se. It's going to be the blockchain with government coin. That's what I really think the future is going to be. So there should have kind of a framework and it should be approved by 2022. By the end of this year, Central African Republic in Africa has adopted Bitcoin as its official currency, the second official country to do so after El Salvador, and it was made illegal by a unanimous decision by their Congress. And then in the huge, a few weeks ago, I believe it was about 6 or 7 weeks ago, we talked about the huge pop in the NFT arena, right, where the volumes have just collapsed. There's been a huge hack in the famously popular Bored Ape NFTs. What they did was they placed links in the Instagram profile and then on the website, and then when you click the link, it was a phishing scam when it connected to your wallets and did all kinds of things. They stole over $13 million, 54 Bored Apes and 30 mutant apes. Bitcoin for the week, 2.30% negative, just over 39,600, and it's obviously still down for the year. All the cryptos had a really bad week this week. Commodities, onto the food crisis. More analysts now are predicting food shortages in 2023 based on what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. Remember, you and I started talking about the food shortages at the beginning of the pandemic, in the middle, let's say, the middle of the pandemic at the end of 2020. And those two countries alone, if you guys don't remember, produced 30% of the global wheat crop. We're starting to have a lot more natural disasters which are affecting the food growing situation outside of the 18 food processing plants that have mysteriously caught on fire, 2 by plane crashes. What are the odds that 2 food processing plants have airplanes that hit them, an accident? What are the odds of that? But in North Dakota, they have literally Between Illinois, Wisconsin, and North Dakota has a huge amount of rain. So their spring wheat goes into a lot of the pizza crusts. So they're not able to plant that. In Illinois and Wisconsin, they're having problems with the soil being too cold. It's about 48 degrees, and they need it to be, I have it listed here, 50 to 55 degrees. And in Illinois, it's too wet. They need 7 dry days to be able to plant the seeds, and it hasn't been dry enough to be able to plant. So on top of the situation of the man-made problem, which is, for example, the war in Russia and Ukraine, we also have the natural disasters as well, which are affecting quite a bit the situation with the food planting. Goya Foods CEO as well. They're the largest Latin food producer in the country, in the United States. They're saying that we're on the precipice of a global food crisis. Brazil, which is the top exporter of coffee, sugar, soybeans, manioc, which I have no idea what that is if you guys want to Google that. Rice, corn, cotton, edible beans, and wheat, top export, meaning one of the top exporters of all these things, gets 85% of their fertilizer from Russia. So obviously we have the situation where the entire Western alliance is going against Russia. The WHO is saying that we need to produce more food, and Brazil is saying that they have 72 fertilizer ships inbound from Russia to not stop it, because obviously if they do stop it, Brazil is going to have a big problem with producing food. Belarus as well is a big fertilizer producer. Brazil gets 28% of their total fertilizer, meaning that Brazil, being one of the top producers of food in the world, they need that fertilizer to be able to go ahead and grow the food. German Economic Minister Robert Habeck said on Tuesday that Russian oil supplies about 12% of the entire German economy. Remember, Germany is the 4th largest economy in the world, one of the largest exporters, and also the largest economy in Europe. They are going to start to look to replace that Russian gas in a matter of days. And now coal-fired power plants, which were so detrimental to the environment before, are starting to reopen in places like Germany and Italy. Meanwhile, the coal burning in the US is also undergoing its biggest revival in decades. China has also reopened shuttered mines and planning new ones, in addition to India opening up too many to count coal-firing power plants. So before it was bad for the environment, but now it's okay, right? Now it's all right. Europe could be pushed into a recession if the Russia gas squeeze widens. Gazprom, which is the state-owned oil and gas producer in Russia, cut off the gas to Poland and also Bulgaria because they refused to pay the bill in rubles. European gas prices surged over 20% after that escalated. And if you guys didn't know, gas accounts for 25% of all of EU's energy production, while Russia typically supplies about 40% of the bloc's natural gas imports. So Europe is officially screwed. U.S. crude overall up for the week. Both international Brent and the U.S. they're both up over 2.5%. They got to $104.69 for the U.S., $109.34 for Brent. Huge move down in the precious metals. And what's essentially happening, if you guys don't know how everything kind of interconnects, is that the United States Central Bank is threatening to increase interest rates very aggressively to be able to combat inflation. So because of that, there's a demand for the dollar. One thing that happens, for example, is that the stock market is considered a variable interest rate or a risky investment because the returns aren't guaranteed. Obviously, stocks go up and down, right? So what happens? People remove their money from the stock market because it's quote unquote risky. Then they move it into the fixed interest rates, which is bond yields or government debt, which pays them a fixed interest rate. And then the dollar value goes up because people, demand and supply. More people want the dollar, the value goes up. And then that's why we had this huge drop in a lot of dollar-based commodities, especially precious metals. Gold went down 1.87%, 1,897, while silver went down over 6% to 2285. That was a huge move in silver. And that obviously is, again, because of the Fed, which is a central bank in the United States, threatening to accelerate its efforts to fight inflation. And one of the things about the tax the rich movement, one of the things I thought was really interesting is the total amount of US wealth and billionaires is $3 trillion. So the amount of all the billionaires, right? They're always talking about tax the rich, tax the rich. The reason why the U.S. has become one of, if not the richest country in the world, right? It's not only the U.S. because obviously the U.S. has facilitated that around the world, is because of the kind of the open market, small government ideal. So when you remove the trillions of dollars that the billionaires have, what happens? That would only pay for 6 months of the government the federal government spending. So what happens after you tax all that money, you get all that money, and then 6 months later, you're out of the money? Then what do? Then you go after the middle class. And that's why countries like Argentina and Venezuela and Cuba have all literally turned into third world countries. Many of you probably don't know Argentina, which is a beautiful country, lived there for quite a while. They were the richest country in the 1900s. Let's call it 1,900. They were the richest country in the world. Not one of the richest, but the richest. They started voting for basically socialism, Peronism, 70 years they've been in that, and now they have extremely high rates of poverty, and they've literally turned into a third world country. Why? Because they, instead of growing the pie for everyone, right? Everybody should be a billionaire, right? Everybody deserves to drive a nice car and have a huge house and have great things. No, they wanted to take away, they wanted to disincentivize, right, the opportunity. And so then what happens? They start sharing the wealth, quote unquote, because obviously you and I both know that the government bureaucrats steal everything, then they give us a little morsel, right? They get the main course, you and I get the side plates, right? And then you don't have a way to continue creating wealth. And that's essentially, I thought it was really interesting, that statistic, so you guys can kind of see the idea of that. Singapore representative on Monday stated that the core inflation, which doesn't include food and energy, went up by 2.9%, which is the fastest rate in a decade. According to the Case Shiller U.S. National Home Index, home prices have gone up 19.8% in February year over year. That's up 19.1% and an annual increase in January, and the third highest rate of increase in 35-year history of the index. My beautiful Tampa went up 32.6%. Miami's up 29.7%. 10 cities, especially along the Sun Belt, went up over 18%. 8, attempting a slow economy and subdue inflation. The Fed is stating that they are going to be much more aggressive in increasing their interest rates. As I mentioned a moment ago, they're expecting in the next 2 meetings in May and June to increase the basis points by 50 points, which means 0.50. And they're even forecasting more hikes in 2022 to try to combat inflation. Eurozone inflation hit a record high for the 6th consecutive month at 7.5%, while Germany, 4th largest economy in the world, largest economy in Europe, and one of the largest exporters in the world, their inflation hit a 40-year high at 7.4%. German Foreign Minister Lindner stated that he's very concerned, quote unquote, by price development, saying that a severe crisis could ensue. Who would have thought it wasn't going to be provisional? Sparking investor concerns over the VCB are going to react. Obviously, remember that what happens with the economies is that most of the industrialized, or let's call them the most advanced economies, are based on consumer spending, meaning you going out and buying a Subway sandwich or buying a service. The United States, for example, is almost 70% consumer spending. So what happens? If they increase interest rates, the value of the stock market goes down. The vast majority of Americans have their wealth in things like the stock market and also real estate. So they increase the interest rates, the value of the stock market and property start to go down. People feel less rich because you open up your retirement account and you're, oh my God, I'm down 20,000. My portfolio's down 30,000 for retirement. And then you feel at ease. You feel uneasy to be able to go and spend money. Well, if 70% of the economy is people spending money and people start getting less confidence to go out and spend money, then that derails the economy. Speaking of the economy, in the first quarter of this year, the first 3 months, the economy actually contracted 1.4% at an annualized pace, meaning that if the percentage of the contraction in the first 3 months of the year, January, February, March, if that was throughout the whole year, it would have contracted 1.4%. And if we have another contraction in the second 3 months of the year, the second semester, it's not semester, but you guys understand what I'm saying? That would mean that we're officially in a recession. The economy is officially contracting. Other than that, France's Macron defeated the candidate Marine Le Pen for the second round in a runoff vote. Marks the first time in a country that they re-elected a president in 2 years, despite public approval rating being at a dismal 36%. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? March 2022 foreclosures in economic news are at their highest. They spiked 181% compared to the March 2020 level. The biggest bankruptcies or the foreclosures were at Chicago, New York, LA, and Houston. the consumers, did raise. So remember that the consumer spending is the highest percentage of the economy. The consumer spending did go up in quarter one, 2.7%. Even though some people are saying that that's because of inflation, people are actually spending less, but because they're spending more on things because of the increase in prices, that's why the consumer prices are actually going up and not down. Corporate news, Tesla shares fell 12% on Tuesday after it was announced that Elon Musk, for the purchase of Twitter, sold around $4 billion in Tesla stock. He's saying that he's not planning on selling anymore, but he is going to put in, if I'm not mistaken, $21 billion of his own money and the rest $25 billion in debt. Thursday, Apple reported revenue growth of 9% year over year, but they did say that they were going to have challenges due to the, supply constraints and related to COVID-19. Remember that they make a lot of their phones in China. China is shutting everything down, and they said that they can cost them about $4 to $8 billion over the next year. Shares of U.S. biotech firm Moderna went up 7%. The shares are still down over 40% in 2022. GE also went down quite a bit at 10% after they advised that they're not going to have a good outlook for the next few quarters. So now we have a situation where we have a lot more companies starting to advise negative information. Apple because of the supply constraints, GE also. So you see how more and more companies now are starting to talk about, well, maybe a future isn't going to be as good as we thought it was. Facebook soared on Thursday. They went up over 17% after they reported an increase in daily users, 1.96 billion daily users for the flagship platform, which is Facebook. This allowed investors to ease concerns about them losing to newer platforms like TikTok. And Amazon plunged over 14% after they gave a disappointing quarterly outlook, and also they're also being swamped by higher costs to run its warehouses and packages deliveries. Trade news. Bank of America sounding the alarm on a leading indicator called freight demand. A leading indicator is basically numbers of something which could lead the actual information about the economy. So freight are the big trucks that move everything around, which is about 72% of all the freight in the United States is run by trucks. So if the demand for trucks collapses, that means that less people are buying things. Remember consumer spending. 6 out of the 12 trucking recessions have brought on actual recessions. So a lot of people are starting to get concerned now because the demand for the trucking industry for freight has gone down 23% year over year. Technology, new international multi-agency university study are trying to develop new ways to develop batteries to make them charge faster, to make them last longer, and also make them more environmentally friendly, which is obviously good because everything is headed in that direction. And in other amazing news, your new digital ID and the mark of the beast is being developed in Sweden and already being implemented. Check out this video, for example.
Hey, in this video, I'm going to show you how Wallet More implant works in real life. After ordering a drink, food, or any other product, all you need to do is tap in your hand to the payment terminal. Forget about the cash, card, or even a smartphone. All you need is your hand. Wallet More implants are biosafe, secure, ultimately convenient, and they are globally acceptable. Wallet More is a wallet of tomorrow. Get into the new era of payments and get your implant now.
So Sweden and Scandinavian countries are creating digital IDs, with the COVID passports being included in those IDs. And Macron, after winning the election, has also announced a digital ID after they took control of the government again. So it's going to be so amazing. It's so convenient. You could just pay it with your hand. Isn't that great? For those of you guys listening on the podcast, that was sarcasm. In investment news, Elon Musk lined up $46 billion in financing. As I mentioned to you guys, all types of banks around the world are giving him money to be able to buy Twitter. Netflix is saying after their atrocious quarterly results that they're going to start cracking down on the password sharing. Over 100 million households are using shared passwords, including 30 million in the US and Canada. And Aliko Dangote, which is Africa's richest person, is deciding to build a $20.5 billion oil refinery and fertilizer complex in Nigeria. It's going to be about 50% of the size of Manhattan. And obviously Nigeria, if you guys didn't know, is going to have the third, I believe, largest population in the world at 2050, and should be one of the largest economies in the world at that time frame as well. International events: Poland Prime Minister confirmed that they sent Soviet tanks to Ukraine, in addition to an announcement from Boris Johnson that they're going to send tanks as well. This isn't necessarily good news for the whole world due to the fact that Russia's President Putin is warning of a lightning fast response for any country that intervenes in the war against Russia. He regards anybody who does get involved as strategic threats for Russia, and the Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated on Monday, the threat of nuclear war is very significant and the risks should not be underestimated. Thursday, in the news that what we just mentioned about inflation, the government should probably stop spending more money. They're saying that we should give Biden asked Congress for another $33 billion for the war in Ukraine. As if the inflation wasn't bad enough, they want to print even more money. And Denmark becomes the first country to halt its COVID-19 vaccination program, saying that the virus is now under control. An unusual facts this week: the world's oldest person in Japan died at 119, second oldest person ever recorded after the French Jean Clément, 122 years old in France. And in 2021, in every 1,500 people or so in Japan are over 100 years old, more than 88% of them women. And in the Philippine capital of Manila and several other coastal cities, if you guys didn't know, the capital of Indonesia, Jakarta, is sinking so fast that they're literally going to move the capital to another island, to another location, one of the islands of Borneo, if I'm not mistaken. They're sinking 7 times faster than the average sea level rise, according to a study, and they're calling for a strict regulatory measure to reduce the groundwater extraction. So I'm a little confused. I thought they kept telling us that the seas were rising because of global warming, but now it actually is proven that they're just taking too much water out of the ground, and that's why things are sinking instead of the water rising too fast. So I'm just kind of getting facts straight here. Powerball lottery in Arizona, somebody won $473 million jackpot. If they take it all at once, which most people do, they're going to have to pay 24% withholding tax, and that's $283 million. Would you like to have $500 million? That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next week.